Good morning. I remember him very well. His name, as we used to call him, was Arjun, which was a term of endearment, calling my grandfather dear man in Persian. My grandfather was my hero, and he taught me 3 incredible lessons that have changed the trajectory of my life. He lived to 104 years old, born in 1900 and passing away in 2004. The first lesson he taught me was that in 1910, when he left home at 10 years old to start his first business, if you can believe that or not, he remembers the price of bread not changing to 1942. 32 years of stable bread price. This blew my mind. A world where inflation was so steady. In fact, there was no inflation back then. The second lesson he taught me was you can never be too overdressed for any ceremony or space or event. And bless him, he wore a 3-piece suit to the day he passed away. And the third lesson he taught me was nothing that he said, but what I watched happen to him. He was an extremely successful man in his day, but he died poor. He died frustrated. And this bewildered me. Somebody so regal, so powerful, my hero, had stopped understanding the way the world had changed. This hurt me somewhat. And this began my trajectory to do what I do today, somebody that helps organizations understand innovation and disruption. And if you think back to a few years ago, the press, social media, and the like had this word innovation become the most popular word thrown around. And eventually it just became a marketing term because many businesses claimed they were innovative, but when you went there, it was pretty much the same experience. Today, we have a new word, Innovation 2.0, or as I call it, and as you know it, disruption. Today, everybody is about being disrupted or being the disruptor. And we can always come across to this word in 2 ways. Very excitedly becoming the disruptors in our sector, in our business, and can't wait to launch our app that's going to take out X and Y businesses. Or we could very well have a 16-year-old right now in Khayelitsha developing something new that will disrupt our businesses. This is the reality we live in today, as Alex explained at the beginning. So I want to take us on a journey for us to understand that disruption and innovation has very much been with us for thousands of years, but I want us to prepare our lens, our perspective, the point of focus that we have as business owners and business people of how to prepare for this future. So join me as we start this journey around disruption. And right back to 3000 BC, 5,000 odd years ago, where we as humanity began to understand this idea of commerce and business, where we understood that bartering products was the beginning of it, and then the exchange of currency for the product or the service. The beginnings of this was called the Silk Road, the trade from China across Europe, Northern Africa and Eastern Europe was really where we started to begin business grow as we understand it today. And for the first few thousand years, the Greco-Romans ruled the Silk Road as we understand it. They grew it to become a massive trading process between these massive different continents and countries and incredibly powerful empires that were birthed through the process of the Silk Road and also died in the Silk Road. 7th century, we see the power dynamics start to shift. The Arabs become the most powerful with the growth of Islam, and we start to see that the Arabs, that they still are very entrepreneurial, start to add a whole bunch of new things to the Silk Road, and we start to see it start to grow. 15th century, power dynamics start to shift again. Now the Turks become the most powerful, or as they were known back then, the Ottomans become the most powerful. They realize that they're very well geographically positioned, and because of this, they're able to charge a very hefty tax on all the products that are coming through their borders connecting Asia and Europe. Now, we all know when one party starts making a lot of money, it starts disgruntling a whole bunch of other people, we start getting pissed off with the idea that these people are making a lot of money and everybody else is having to pay really high prices. And this begins innovation as we understand it. And the first country to really start to become disgruntled by these hefty taxes, these very expensive products, was Portugal. Portugal began in the 15th century something called the European Age of Discovery, the spice route as it's become known today. And what they decided to do was to sail directly to where the products come from, rather than relying on all the middlemen through the process of the Silk Road. Many middlemen, we understand, all have to add their percentage, creating a very expensive product. The spice route went directly to the source. That innovation cut the price of the products being traded on the Silk Road by up to 50% at times. Now we know that if some people are making a lot of money and all of a sudden their profit margin gets cut, a whole bunch of hostilities start to begin. A whole bunch of fighting starts to begin where countries start fighting each other over the products that are being traded. And through my research, when I was doing the research for the Keynote, I was looking for stories that were going to be really interesting. In 1521, the Dutch and the English were fighting over this island called Run. Run, back then, was the most expensive real estate in the world. Quick show of hands, does anybody know where Run is? Back then, in 1521, it had all the nutmeg, and nutmeg back then was worth more than gold. And because of the hostilities really starting to get very violent and a lot of deaths happening, they decided to do a quick treaty where they gave up this little island called Manhattan in return for this island called Run. Quick show of hands, does anybody know where Manhattan is? Obviously. Manhattan today is worth trillions of dollars. Nobody even knows where Run is. This gives us an inclination of disruption just a few hundred years ago, where we couldn't even imagine giving up Manhattan for anything today. But let's carry on. The power dynamic starts shifting again. 16th century, we see the Spanish become the most powerful, and there's all these wars around who can hold the spices, the most important part of the trade for the Silk Road and the spice route. 17th century, the Dutch East Indian Company becomes the most powerful, and we see these power dynamics start to switch faster and faster. In fact, in the 17th century, people were given bonuses by being given cloves. Think about today. If you were given cloves as a bonus, I think you'd be pretty pissed off. But back then, cloves were worth more than gold and really, really, really expensive and were really something very luxurious. And so you might be asking me, John, what's this deal with spices? Something we can pick up just for a few cents at different grocery stores. Back then, we were seeing empires grow and die, people getting killed by the thousands for something so arbitrary like spices. Well, there are 4 reasons that spices were worth so much. First and foremost, back then, people in the East had created this idea of mystery and intrigue around spices. They told the people from the West that spices were incredibly hard to plant, incredibly hard to warehouse, incredibly hard to transport. In fact, the whole process was so arduous and so difficult that we have to inflate the prices. So the people in the West bought into the story and started to pay really incredibly inflated prices. Today, this is called marketing. Anybody heard of that? Yes. That's why Louis Vuitton charges 28,000 Rand for a bag that's worth just a few thousand Rand. Sorry if anybody's bought a purchase recently. Mystery and intrigue. Secondly, people in the West, for the first time ever, had a product that would make them more healthy, make them more vital. And we all know that today spices like ginger make us feel better when we got the flu. Turmeric brings our blood pressure down. But this was brand new for the people in the West. So when you were alive, spices were made and used to make you feel more vital. But also when you died, spices were used to make you look a bit more perky while people kissed you on the way down to Mother Earth. But the most important reason that spices were worth so much was that people back then thought that spices kept food fresher for longer. But in fact, we know today that spices only makes rotten food taste better for longer. Besides salt, no other spice actually preserves food, and this is critical to the story. This is where we start to see disruption take hold. Remember, the spice route and the Silk Road had a few innovations here and there, but where trade that lasted thousands of years never saw disruption until 1822. In 1822, this gentleman here called Frederick Tudor, whose family was in shipping, was the Steve Jobs of the day. He was experimenting with a whole bunch of ways to be able to create bigger revenues for his family's shipping business. And he started experimenting by taking two pieces of wood and putting a whole bunch of different things between these two pieces of wood in order to create an insulation. And finally, he realized that if you put sawdust between two pieces of wood, he in fact created the first freezer ever invented. So what he did was he loaded up his ships and went to the cold parts of the world with his freezer containers, loaded up all his ships with ice, and brought this ice back to the hot parts of the world. This was revolutionary. People, for the first time in hot cities in summer, were having cold drinks. In fact, some people called it witchcraft because they couldn't even believe that you could have a cold drink in summer. His business did so well, it spawned off a whole bunch of new businesses, like the ice box, where people would have these ice boxes inside their homes where they would keep their food fresher for longer, and having a very technologically advanced logistics system delivering this ice to people's homes twice a week so that you could keep your food fresher for longer. Now, all of a sudden, spices dropped in price by up to 60%. Because all of a sudden, spices were only now used for flavoring food, and ice was actually kept to keep food fresher for longer. But Frederick Tudor's business didn't last that long, because at the turn of the 19th century, we start to see a new invention start to pop up called electricity. And because electricity now starts to get used in certain labs and science halls around the States, we start to see these professors start to experiment with electricity, and we start to see the beginnings of Frederick Tudor's business start to fade. The gentleman here is John Gorey. He's a professor and a lab scientist, and he wants to invent the mechanical ice-making machine so that he can experiment more and more in his lab. So he invents this mechanical ice-making machine, and now all of a sudden, I don't need to bring ice from the other parts of the world. All I need to do is make my ice right here and deliver it to you right there. The whole inflated price of ice started to fade away, and all of a sudden, Frederick Tudor's business was in trouble. The ice king that was bringing a product that nobody else had, all of a sudden had some serious competition, much cheaper than anybody that he had ever come into contact with. And so you're so pissed off about it. Obviously, he innovated, right? Unfortunately not. He was so pissed off about his business starting to fade, he started to run a huge smear campaign, a huge marketing campaign, calling all the ice coming from John Gorey's mechanical ice-making machine fake ice. How can you peasants buy that fake ice when I bring you the real thing from the other side of the world? We know that's bullshit now because ice is ice. But John Gorey's business also didn't last that long. Electricity now started to become ubiquitously available, and we all started to get fridges inside our homes. Quick show of hands, because anybody here doesn't have a fridge? Don't be embarrassed, don't be embarrassed. It's fine if you live in a cave. Obviously, we all have fridges today. It makes no sense that we don't have fridges. In fact, our fridges today are like a digital assistant with a compressor attached to it. Fridges that have been inside our homes and we couldn't imagine a life without. Well, this is where my story starts to heat up. In the next 15 years, nobody will have fridges inside their homes. In fact, in 2 cities in the world today, right now, we're starting to see the decline in fridge sales. In these 2 cities that I'm going to mention to you a little bit later, construction has already started to shift where we have smaller kitchens inside people's homes. And you wouldn't be able to imagine a life without a fridge. How will we store all the goodies we buy from Woolies, even though they never go off? But how would we store them without a fridge? Well, welcome to the age of drone delivery on demand. Drone deliveries on demand are about to change the very fundamentals of what we keep inside our houses, how long we store them for, and why we even would need to store anything inside our homes. Amazon is claiming that over the next 15 years, they'll be able to deliver anything to your home in under 60 seconds. If you can have anything delivered to your home in under 60 seconds, why would we need to store anything? So I lied a little bit. We'll have a kind of a fridge. It'll be called an eco-fridge. It'll be sitting on the outside of your home so that the drone will have access to it. This kind of a fridge? Will it be a very intelligent fridge where it will have algorithms and sensors inside it, making sure to deliver and order the products on your behalf so that you never run out of X, Y, and Z and whatever you need inside your homes? A very intelligent fridge will be communicating with these blimps that we'll be having floating outside our suburbs. And my clicker stopped. There we go. These blimps, they'll be floating outside our suburbs, our complexes, around sports arenas. These blimps will have a whole range of products with an army of drones ready to deliver them to you in under 60 seconds. These are already in play in Amazon's offices in San Francisco and in New York. And if you think this is a bit far-fetched, meet Matternet. Matternet is the first company in the world that has now started to partner with the Swiss government to start delivering blood ampules between hospitals. And today, now with the legislation has changed, that anything below 16 kilos can now start getting delivered between Swiss towns, cities, and villages. In San Francisco and New York, where Amazon Fresh is at its strongest, they are able to deliver anything to your home in under 60 minutes using this old invention called the car. You remember them? Going through all that traffic, able to deliver anything to your home. And when I say anything, anybody been to a Whole Foods, you know it's a plethora of incredible foods in under 60 minutes to your home. And those cities, San Francisco and New York, the two cities I mentioned before, look, fridge sales are already on the decline. The point of the beginning of the keynote is this, is that none of the spice traders became ice traders. None of the ice traders became mechanical ice manufacturers. None of the mechanical ice manufacturers switched to manufacturing fridges. And anybody here know a fridge manufacturer developing drones? Anybody seen a Defy drone or a Whirlpool drone? No. And that's the point of this keynote. And that's why it's called Mastering the Art of Disruption. It's an art form that we have to learn on how to prepare for the world that we're moving towards. And disruption, just to make sure we're all on the same page, are forces that are impacting our ecosystem that we cannot control, dictate, or understand. The world we're moving into have totally new rules that we need to start learning. And before I start talking about how to master the art of disruption, let's talk about some of the questions we need to think about. Some of the questions we need to ask and certainly make us feel a little bit uncomfortable about how we're showing up. Are we living lives based on a set of memories of the past? Or are we living a life based on the vision of our future? Most of us are in repetition mode, doing the same thing, hoping for a different result. Very few of us are living a life based on the vision of our future. Second question is, are you an architect or a victim of this future? Quick show of hands, any victims in the audience? Obviously not. Victim is an internal dialogue. On the outside, we're all architects. We're all building the future, but are we really? Are we really changing our behavior, lens, and perspective about what's to come? And it's always based on the quality of the questions that we ask. You see, Einstein said it best. He said, if I was given 60 minutes to answer a question and my life depended on it, I would spend 55 minutes devising the question's problem. I would spend 55 minutes understanding the problem and asking the perfect question and only 5 minutes answering it. And we all live busy lives. We don't have time for a new question. John, I got a bonus to earn, a conference to go to, kids to drop off at a school, a lazy spouse to look after. I don't have time for a new question. I love it that ladies always laugh when I say that. It's never the men. I mean, what are you talking about? My wife's not lazy. But what unfortunately happens when we don't ask a new, courageous, bold, and uncomfortable question, we end up like a business like this. 10 years ago, Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? If you watched that news conference when Microsoft took them over, where they went from a $100 billion business to a $7 billion business in under 6 years, the exco, the CEO, the board, they were all in tears. And the reason they were in tears is that none of them were lazy or stupid. They just decided to swim in the wrong direction. And in the world we're moving towards, it's much more important which direction we go into rather than the speed we're going at. And unfortunately, the world we live in today celebrates efficiency and speed, not direction. And if we have the right direction, we build the small little fruit company. 1996, when Steve Jobs went back to Apple and the direction of the business shifted, and they're never about speed, but about creating the best products ever, have created the first $1 trillion business. Direction is more important than speed. And a lot of us know about the 10,000-hour rule. Anybody who doesn't know about the 10,000-hour rule? Malcolm Gladwell made it famous in Outliers. His whole concept was if you want to do something at the world's best level, you need to practice for 10,000 hours. And this is really, really valid for somebody like Serena Williams, who's done hundreds of thousands of hours, and she's excellent at what she does, and the 10,000-hour rule really works with her, and so it does with Cristiano Ronaldo, also hundreds of thousands of hours, making him maybe the world's best player ever. But the problem is, in the world of business, we realize that the rules are changing, and in tennis and soccer, the rules haven't changed. In our world, our 10,000 hours means nothing as we start moving into the future. Our 10,000 hours are all about preparing for a new future and about discounting what we've done, and the preparation for the future becomes much more important. And quick story before I move on to the actual nuts and bolts of the keynote. The world's most expensive company in 1889 was called Ox Baron. They made the wheels for all the wagons for transportation back then. They were the Apple of the day. They were the world's most expensive organization. They could do no wrong until at the turn of the 19th century, the railroads began to enter the market, and so did the combustion engine. All of a sudden, people had different options for delivery, and the process of delivering products and services, products around the States started to change. More efficient, a bit cheaper. And by 1920, Ox Baron realized that they were in a little bit of trouble. And so what they did was invite an innovation specialist to come in and take a look at the business. And what he did was spend 6 months and then deliver a presentation back to the board. And what he said when he started his presentation back to the board was this: we have spent 80 years getting really good at something that no one is going to need in 20 years. What we should be doing is changing the wheel, maybe adding a little bit of rubber, a little bit of steel, shifting how we manufacture what we do to be more in line with what the world needs from us. The board thought about it, and of course, because they've been so successful for so long, they decided that this gentleman really didn't understand what he was talking about, and they fired him. And so he went and opened this little business called Dunlop. His name was John Boyd Dunlop, building the third largest tire business in the world. And this again gives us an idea that what we get stuck on as business owners is something I call capability advantage. We only ask questions that allow us to practice our own capabilities. And the world we're moving in doesn't care about your capabilities. In fact, artificial intelligence is going to eat up most of our capabilities over the next 5 to 10 years. Another thing that we all worry about so much is, are we doing better than our competition? Again, a bullshit statistic, because if you're competing against somebody who's a spice trader like your spice trading business, you just end up being the best spice trader in a world that doesn't give a shit about spice. What we should be doing, something that we all give lip service to, is the human advantage or consumer centricity. But I believe that very few companies are consumer centric. Most businesses are balance sheet centric, then consumer centric, and then employee centric. And what this does is we prioritize the balance sheet. It gives us the fitness for efficiency and profitability, but not agility. And so what we should stop celebrating is IQ, something that was so important, getting us to the world we are in today. But IQ is going to be replaced by AI in a phenomenal way over the next 5 to 10 years. Another thing that we could maybe not give so much focus to is EQ, which I think is still really important, but definitely not the most important Q in the world we're moving into. The Q we all need to be practicing is AQ, agility quotient, adaptability quotient, flexibility quotient, experimentation quotient, the fact that we can move between sectors comfortably, celebrating people's experimentation around us and in our businesses. And so what I'm going to do today, in the 17 minutes that I have left, is talk about two things: micro-inspection and mega-exploration. Micro-inspection, the voice inside our heads, and mega-exploration, what's coming, and how do we prepare ourselves and leave with a new question in mind. Maybe the most difficult slide I'll share with you today for you to digest is this. It's from a gentleman called Alan Watts, and he says this. He says, the knowledgeable man has to learn something new every day, but the wise man has to unlearn something new every day. And boy, is that hard for men. Much more difficult for men than for women. The malleability of our brains are different. And for us to unlearn becomes critical. And one of the biggest problems for disruption or innovative behavior shift is past successes. You see, I call it the ironic rut of success, where we often become stuck in our past successes, where we become both the prisoner and the warden of our success. I do workshops around the world with excos and board members, and about a third of the way through every workshop, I get the same thing. No, not that innovative, John. Come back. Let's just innovate here. Let's just be a little bit better. Let's be mobile first. Let's create an app. And that shows me that that's deeply caught up in a prison where we're both the prisoner and the warden of our past success. I, unfortunately or fortunately, know this prison far too well. I remember I was 8 years old and the yo-yo craze arrived in South Africa. If you remember that, you're old, but yes, the yo-yo craze arrived in South Africa. My brother and I, my mom was a single mom family, my brother and I arrived home really excited because the cool kids, or should I say the rich kids, had yo-yos at school, and we came home to ask my mom to buy us yo-yos, and I'm sure it broke my mom's heart, but it super pissed me off that my mom couldn't afford to buy us yo-yos. I made a commitment to myself at 8, 9 years old that I'll never be financially constrained again, so I started working like a madman. And by 13, I had my first job packing bags at a spa. And then I kept moving up the chain of command. And eventually, by the time I was 26 years old, I had a range of restaurants, retail stores, vending machines, and shoe distribution businesses around South Africa. I was flying high. 27 years old, multi-millionaire, fancy cars, fancy houses, fancy clothes, fancy businesses, and a fancy personality to go with it. You know what I'm saying? But I was from Joburg. Tattoos, muscles, M3 cab, Porsche. I could do nothing wrong. I had it all happening. 29 years old, the bank came and took my fancy car, my fancy house. Stop laughing. It's not like bro. Dissing me. Fancy house, fancy clothes, and my fancy personality to go with it, believe it or not. And I blame it 100% on my high levels of testosterone. You see, in your 20s, men are thinking with this, not with this. And unfortunately, I see board members around the world that are still thinking with this. We just need more now. In my new book, I call it the horny teenage boy syndrome. We need more now. Forget about tomorrow. Let's just now whatever we can now, and then tomorrow will look after itself. And I did what every responsible boy does. I took zero responsibility. It wasn't me. It was my partners. They were thieves. My staff were lazy. Those bloody Chinese people are making everything cheaper. My consumers don't even know what they want. And I fell into a deep depression. I call it the emotional long drop of victimization. You know, when you're swimming around in shit and everybody else around you is also swimming in shit, you all smell as bad as each other. You don't even realize it. And I suffered from 3 different types of victimhood. The first one, the classic one, called the martyr victim. We know this one well. It visits every single human being. When you feel sorry for yourself, you didn't get that business deal, the promotion, you ate far too much chocolate cake the night before, you're feeling a little bit fat. When you feel sorry for yourself. But it's not the only type of victim. The other one I call the arrogant inferior victim. Best described by, let's say, somebody's driving past in a Ferrari, and in front of the person driving past in the Ferrari, you're like, hey, but like a car. But in your head, you're going, thief. Must be a thief. There's no way you could have got that car. Must be daddy's money. Or, did you hear she got a promotion? She must have slept her way to the top. There's no way she got that. Whenever we have anybody more successful than us, we arrogantly make them more inferior to us to make ourselves feel better. But guess what? You'll never drive a Ferrari because you have to be a thief, and you'll never get a promotion because you've got a stump to be able to get that promotion. And my favorite one is the arrogant superior victim, the one who's always angry about everything. The bloody government, the Zuma, the dollar, the rand exchange, the black people, the white people, the green people, the pink people, and all of them all idiots because I and my friends are superior to all these monkeys below us. And then what we do is we invite all our arrogant superior friends together for a braai. And then we braai together and bitch and moan about the rugby coach and about this and about that and about this. And then we leave. And the only thing that changes is our blood pressure. Nothing else changes. I call this peeing in your nappy. It's obviously a hypothetical scenario. If you are wearing a nappy here, my condolences. But imagine for a second that you're standing somewhere, it's winter, you're cold, you all of a sudden need a pee, and you're not near a toilet. So you start negotiating inside your head and think to yourself, what am I going to do? I am wearing a nappy, there is nobody around, and I am cold, and what I'm going to... Oh, man. I feel like such a champ. I've got my own private jacuzzi here now. It's nice and warm. I feel warm and relieved. And this is exactly like victim thinking. You feel warm, you feel relieved, and you smell like pee. So next time you catch yourself bitching, moaning, and not taking responsibility, remember, have a chuckle. There I was, peeing in my nappy again. And so I took 5 years to climb out of this emotional long drop of victimization. From being a multimillionaire to not being able to pay 6,000 Rand rent, you can imagine it's shameful and embarrassing. So I did everything in my power to try and climb out of this emotional long drop of victimization. And I did a whole bunch of different workshops and watched a whole bunch of different talks. And I started to follow a guy called Dr. Joe Dispenza. And what he says is this. He says that every single human being has a mind. This mind has a personality. This personality has a behavior. These behaviors are made up of habits, and these habits are made up of rituals. We, as human beings, are made up of moment-by-moment rituals. If we want to change any part of our personality and mind, all we have to really do is change one small ritual. So instead of calling the guy in a Ferrari a thief, say, can't wait to be in one. That small ritual starts to shift your perspective and your personality. And without sounding cliche, you can pretty much change any part of your life by applying this process. Think about it. If cauliflower can become pizza, my friends, you can become anything you want to become. Another claps for me because not cauliflower pizza shit sounds shit. I mean, tastes shit. Let's talk about the future. I've only got 10 minutes left. Alex, I might be running a bit over. But here we go. Third industrial revolution is what we are in today. We know about the first, we know about the second. What keeps industrial revolutions moving are the three pillars that keep economies moving. Energy, to create things. Transport, to transport them. Communication, to tell people about them. Third industrial revolution, where we're in right now. This slide best described by Jeremy Rifkin in his YouTube documentary called The Third Industrial Revolution. 90 minutes explaining my one slide here. Please watch it. I highly recommend it. He is the economic advisor to China, Germany, and the EU. So he knows what he's talking about. And this is what he says. He says, energy has moved from coal, oil to distributed, decentralized energy, meaning that we can make our own energy and won't rely on governmental institutions to giving it to us over the next 10 to 15 years. Transportation is moved from horse carriages, railroads, combustion engines with pilots and drivers to autonomous electric vehicles. Communication has moved from newspapers with steam-powered printers, electricity with television and radio, and now the internet. The major difference between Industrial Revolution 1, 2, and 3 is that 3, over the next 5 to 10 years, will become 100% free. The pillars that have held capitalism up are imploding. So you might say to me, John, what bullshit are you talking? There's no way. How can it be for free? Quick show of hands. Who uses WhatsApp here? Everybody. Why? It started already. Believe it or not, eh? We weird as human beings. What's exceptional today is expected tomorrow, like it was always with us. Remember the first time you caught Uber? Oh my God, this thing's incredible. I've got to tell everybody about this because I just got in. Guy picked me up, dropped me off, no money exchanged. Remember the first time? Second time you're catching Uber? Shit, this thing's fucking broken, man. I'm going to get late for my meeting. What a piece of shit. Yesterday was exceptional. Today, it's just what it used to be. So the third industrial revolution is one thing we need to keep in mind, that these things are starting to move towards absolutely free. Also, we start to see that energy, for example, is now starting to be created by green energy over dirty energy. China is canceling coal plants. India is canceling coal plants. Saudi Arabia is in big cuck. They're starting to change their business in a massive way. Combustion engines are being banned around the world. Norway by 2025, France by 2030, India by 2040. Imagine you worked for BP Engine or any of these. By 2025, you're like, bye-bye. Thanks for coming. It's great to have you here. We're getting all combustion engines out the way. Also, we're starting to see Uber starting to experiment with subscription transportation, $100, and you can catch as many Ubers as you want. This makes transportation become cheaper, cheaper, and cheaper, and energy cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And you all love driving through William Nickel and Louis Buerta, lovely dodging all the taxis, but thank your lucky stars you're not in Mexico. They use drones for advertising in Mexico between the traffic. This is a real picture of drones asking people why they haven't switched on Uber Pool to pick up more people on the way to work. And if you think drones are very far-fetched, check this map out. Green shows that everybody's been legislated to do drone flying. Gray says it's about to happen. Yellow says it's closer to green, and red says no drone flying. That's 30-plus countries that have now legislated officially drone deliveries are starting to happen all around us. Plus, we're starting to see that the likes of Tesla, Google, Facebook, all starting to launch satellites, balloons, and drones into our atmosphere to give everybody on Earth free, fast Wi-Fi. This is Google's Loon project, and there's many, many of them. And this is all going to be creating a massive disruption. I mean, look, with WhatsApp and Skype disrupted the telecom sector by $386 billion. Skype got benefited by $2 billion. WhatsApp benefited by $19 billion. Where did $365 billion go? Into thin air. And this is what the stats look like. 4 billion people connected to the internet at the moment. Over the next 8 to 10 years, we'll have 8 billion people connected to the internet. And that is going to be changing the very fundamentals of how we operate. 4 billion people never been on Instagram, used YouTube, used WhatsApp, or been on your online business. And of course, we're starting to see some real businesses fold because of this. Look, this is DSTV. 23,000 Rand a year, 2-year contract, installation contract, Netflix. 3,960 Rand. And you all might be saying to me, sports, but I got to tell you, 23,000 Rand to watch 2 rugby matches a weekend is a little bit steep. And you're going to be able to start streaming it like before. And obviously, DSTV is innovating, right? No, what a bunch of poopballs. Now they've gone to try and get legislation changed so Netflix can go. It sounds like Frederick Tudor calling all the ice fake ice rather than innovating. And let's quickly talk about the fourth industrial revolution. Very quickly, the fourth industrial revolution is a convergence of these 8 exponential technologies. I was in San Francisco a little bit earlier this year, and I saw the car of the future. The car of the future had in it networks, sensors, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and cryptocurrency. The car arrives and says, "Hello, John." I say, "Hi, car." It says, "Please get in." I say, "Thank you very much." Where are you going? "I'm going to the airport." "No problem. It'll be $20. I give $20. Voice recognition, artificial intelligence, and blockchain transfers the $20 into the car's pocket. On the way to the airport, I realize that I'm running late. I tell the car, "Listen, I'm really running late." The car says, "No problem. Give me another $10. I give him another $10. And the car then starts talking to every other car on the road, giving it each $1 to get out the way so we can get to the airport quicker. And all the fourth industrial revolution is doing is speeding things up, like I'm starting to speak because I'm running out of time. 50 million users took 68 years to fly. 50 million users took 5 years to use PayPal. 50 million users took 4 years to use YouTube, 3 years to use Facebook, 2 years to use Twitter, and 50 million users took 4 months to play Candy Crush. That's how quickly things are starting to move. And all of it's based on exponential computing or technology. The world's fastest computer right now is called the Summit. It's the size of a soccer field. It needs its own nuclear reactor to power up. And should I say it's a classical supercomputer, the way we understand computing as it is today. You can imagine how fast it is. I mean, it says this. It says, with the capability to do 200 quadrillion calculations per second. I mean, it sounds mind-boggling. I don't even know what that means. So I did a bit further research, and I found that this is what it means. If every person on Earth completed 1 calculation per second, it would take the world population 305 days to do what Summit can do in 1 second. That's Summit. But we're about to see the disruption of classical computers. The age of the quantum computer is here. Development of the quantum computer marks a leap forward in computing capability far greater than that from the abacus to a modern-day supercomputer, with performance gains in billion-fold realm and beyond. In other words, summit, billions of times faster. I mean, I can't even comprehend what that means. I don't think anybody can comprehend what that means. And already IBM has opened up its platforms for all of us to start playing with quantum computing. So I did some research on quantum computing, and this is what Google tells me. Quantum computers are bullshit. And the reason is that when we as human beings don't understand something, we become pessimistic about it. We boo-boo it. Do you know how much courage it takes to be pessimistic? Nothing. You know how much courage it to be optimistic? 100%. To look for opportunities rather than bitching and moaning that that's not going to be happening, it takes easy. Very, very easy. So quantum computers is just really about understanding how the universe works, how quantum science works, and digitizing it. And that's really what they've done as scientists. I've been to 3 lectures about quantum computing. I still have no bloody idea how they work. And it's now the size of 2 fingernails. This is the chip for quantum computing. 2 fingernails compared to a soccer field uses 25 kilowatts of power a day compared to a nuclear reactor, which is what Summit requires. The people of the internet obviously understood this. They launched something called Internet Protocol 6 that gives us the ability to connect 78 octillion devices. That's everything from pets, plates, pacemakers, and every grain of sand will have its own IP address on Internet Protocol 6. And remember, before you pee in your nappy, remember, we're already in the future, because in 1998, when the internet started, there were some clear rules around the internet. Never get into a stranger's car and don't meet people from the internet. You remember that? Back then, people on the internet were dodgy. Hey, you sound real cute. What do you do? How are you doing, like, after school? Like, do you want to meet up? Yeah, sure. I'm 14 years old. I like to power lift. And today, we literally call a stranger from the internet and get into the car. It's called? We literally call a stranger from the internet and go and stay in their home. It's called? We literally call a stranger from the internet and go on a date. It's called? I love it that nobody knows what Tinder is, eh? Not me. I don't do Tinder. So, ladies and gentlemen, leadership is what we need to be focusing on. And the leadership traits that we need to be focusing on, the way we shift, the way we look at the future is everything. The lens that we are looking the future with is everything. And in order for us to survive and thrive in the future, where we make decisions from is of critical importance. The logical decision is being replaced by AI. The primal desire decision of more is based on an immature masculine world that's got us to here. The only place we need to make decisions from is from the heart, following our highest excitement, giving us endless energy and curiosity to be able to sustain that energy in a world that nobody understands, in a world that you can thrive by shifting your lens. Thank you so much for your attention.